think one of the reasons I've become interested in this question recently is that I've gotten some pushback where people are like, but I am who I am, and I don't want you to try to change me. And they seem to be worried about being told that they should be someone else. And this is where, when you're coaching someone and the leader says they need to have more executive presence, we want people to be the best version of themselves in these different situations. The problem is that as kids, we believe kids can grow and learn and develop, but as adults, we're sort of like, well, you're this, you're a doctor, you're a lawyer, you're, as if you can't change. But we know from adult development that you can change and develop. So that's why I say, you're not fixed. You're not just this person who's set in stone.
Welcome to What's Possible, where leadership thrives. I'm Eileen Schaefer, and I'm glad you're here. Behind every powerhouse communicator and relationship builder is a strategic thinker who leads with curiosity. Because of that, we believe that your journey to becoming the best leader starts with you. You've probably heard stepping up your leadership presence is key to advancing in your career. But should you fake it till you make it? Today, I'm thrilled to welcome one of the most sought-after executive coaches and experts on executive presence, Shannon Polly. Shannon is known for her unique approach that blends her acting background and positive psychology expertise to help senior leaders unlock their authentic leadership presence. Authentic is the secret sauce here. We are not talking about putting on a mask or trying to be someone who you're not. Shannon is here to share her insights on how you can embrace your distinctive strengths and your qualities to become a more impactful and influential leader. Get ready for practical tips, research-based strategies, and a fresh take on cultivating your genuine leadership presence. Let's find out what's possible when we choose to take up space and inspire those around us. Shannon Polly, it is great to be together. Thanks for joining me on What's Possible.
I'm thrilled to be here. I've been following the show, so I'm a girl fan. And girl, whatever that
is. Well, thank you for being an active listener. And for those of you listeners who are also active listeners, I hope you take a moment to follow and subscribe on wherever you get your favorite podcasts. And if you feel so inclined, certainly leave a comment too. We love that. So Shannon is joining us as one of our esteemed Silicon Valley change executive coaches. She is highly sought after. I get calls all the time for people wanting to bring in Shannon for two huge reasons. And one in particular is what we're going to be talking about today. But Shannon is always brought in for those senior leaders where their HR partner calls me and says, we have a senior leader who is phenomenal. The company wants to keep investing in this person, and they kind of need to take that next step and have, I hate to call it executive presence because, again, that puts somebody in a box and it almost makes us feel like there is a defined definition of this is what executive presence looks like. We're going to talk about that later. So I don't want to go deep in there, but really somebody who is stepping into a leadership role and how they maybe present themselves, how they talk about things and gather influence and all of that. There's a big step between different levels of leadership. And so Shannon is often brought in to help with that step and help people really fully embrace who they are and what their beautiful uniqueness is that they bring to that role. And so it's one-to-one coaching with our senior leaders. And then on top of that, she goes and does workshops on appreciative inquiry, as well as other workshops on, again, leadership presence, tapping into her acting background that she combines with positive psychology, and a whole host of team building that she does with our leaders. So I'm going to stop fangirling on Shannon and everything she brings to the table. And I'm going to say, Shannon, you take it away with something that's maybe not on your resume. That's just, who is Shannon underneath all this amazing academic background, amazing professional resume? Who are you underneath all that?
Well, first of all, I'm just going to make you my agent. So I'm going to start from there. So thank you for that intro. Who am I? I'm originally from Kansas, and my mom loves to cook. She's written a cookbook. She taught me how to bake. My kids last night were making 140 chocolate chip cookies to give to their camp. And they, I'm making air quotes, they cleaned up afterwards. So I would say part of what I am is I love to give things to people. I would say kindness is a top strength. And so when I moved to New York City to act full time, I brought baked goods to my neighbors, because that's what you do in Kansas, right? You're new, and they looked at me like I was insane. They looked down at the food like, is this poisoned? And I was like, what? That's what we do. And they were like, oh, you're from the Midwest. Okay, we get it. So I think I try to bring a little bit of that Midwest, work ethic and thinking of other people to all the things that I do. So that's part of who I am, I would say.
Well, and I have been the lucky recipient of that. The first time I met Shannon, she had a bag of goodies for me. Her mom's amazing cookbook of, deep home Southern cooking. And then Shannon's book, which I failed to mention, she co-authored a book called Character Strengths Matter.
That's right. How to live a full life.
How to live a full life. And mine is so bent up at this point. Every page is earmarked. And then, as our listeners know, and I'm sure they're tired of hearing, I just graduated from the MAP program that Shannon went to. I have told every single one of my classmates, because we dive deep into the VIA strengths assessment. And for our listeners, pop on to viacharacterstrengths.org and you can take the assessment at no charge. And then get Shannon's book, actually, and it will walk you through the different strengths. But it is a beautiful, beautiful book that Shannon co-authored with another coach on our team, Catherine Britton. So I highly recommend that. But in my goodie bag was that. But more importantly, I just want to give one more shout out to the kind of human you are, Shannon. And then let's dive deep into our topic. My mom passed away, as did my dad, back to back. And Shannon and her mom showed up with so much food. We don't even live in the same town. I'm in San Diego. Shannon is on the East Coast, as she mentioned, and her mom happens to live in San Diego. Shannon came out and they cooked and cooked and cooked and provided us food. I could have, fed 200 people based on the kindness, generosity, and just thoughtfulness. And that's the kind of human you are. And I love your Kansas roots. And I think we need more of that in this world, where we knock on neighbors' doors and share cookies and share goodness and kindness. So thank you for being a role model in that.
Oh, you're very sweet. Thank you so much. I'm a pale comparison to my generations past, but I try.
All right. So let's dive in. We're talking about leadership presence. And I know we want to also weave in authenticity, which is core to leadership presence. How did you get so into this? Obviously, your acting background, but what made this particular topic really resonate with you?
When I was still acting full time, I got asked to be a part of a company where we taught improvisation in businesses. And at first I thought they're going to think we're totally weird. They're going to think this is totally strange. They're never going to buy it. And I went in and I had to change my costume, right? I had to wear like business casual or business. And I walked in and I realized these people needed to play. They needed to have fun. They needed to engage. And when they did, they loosened up. They started to shift. And then I got the opportunity to work with another company where we went into a women's initiative in a professional services firm. And I specifically remember this one woman who was, you might describe as, sort of a mousy accountant. She didn't take up much space. Her shoulders were a little hunched. She didn't always make eye contact. And this was in the days before everyone did a webinar or a town hall. And she said she was doing a webinar for 200 people the next week. And she looked terrified. And I thought, okay, well, we've got a couple hours. We can work on this. And all I did was give her some suggestions that I'd learned spending years in drama school, which was to straighten up her spine, to think of that, sternum in the mid her chest bone, to open it up a little to the room, to, imagine as if she were royalty. And by the end of these 3 hours, suddenly she was bigger. She was taking up more space. She had more energy. And when we came back, she looked like she had won the lottery. She was like, my bosses said the webinar was really great. She was so excited. And I thought, wow, so these things actually work. They actually translate to other people. And it doesn't take that much. Normally we have a coaching engagement, which is 6 months, and you dive deep, and all of that is great. And you can get to the why behind, what are your beliefs behind, power and authenticity. And, we can talk about that. But sometimes just the simple, slightest adjustment, a physical adjustment, or what I like to call the outside in, can shift someone. And suddenly they have a huge revelation. So when I saw that it could really work and it could really translate, I thought, oh, this is for me. This is where I want to be. So that's what I love to do.
Yeah. Well, and I would imagine, I know I did it. I'm thinking our listeners, when Shannon was talking about shoulders back and standing up straight, I bet everybody shifted as they heard you say that. I could feel me, even just that reminder, because we kind of lean in, we get hunched over our computers, and then we take that hunchback wherever we go. And so having that physical presence internally then gets reflected and projected externally.
Yeah. And what actors know and do is that your outside informs the inside. And this is long before Amy Cuddy's research on power poses, which, while some of it has been questioned, the core part of the research on how it shifts your own perception of yourself and it shifts how well you perform in an interview, those two things have been replicated. So actors always know that when you put on different clothes, you feel differently when you put on the shoes. And so I like to approach presence from both the inside out, the psychological aspect of it, and the outside in, which is the physical or somatic aspect of presence.
Well, and it's really interesting that you say that, because we've had two people come join me. One, obviously, Lisa Zagarmi came to join me to talk about the body in leadership. And then we also had Rebecca Aurora come. And those have been two of our most listened to podcasts, because I think people are looking for ways to enhance our leadership. And it's the most natural way for us to stand in our power when you think about the body. And I just want to dial back real quickly. Shannon was referencing a TED Talk by Amy Cuddy. She's also written books, Amy Cuddy, and has one called specifically Presence. And I don't recall the name of her first book, but her TED Talk is excellent on how you show up physically. So if you're interested in looking at Amy's TED Talk, and then as Shannon mentioned, some of the research was questioned just in terms of it being replicable. However, there's pieces of it that Shannon said the research has shown consistently to be accurate. So, and that is a TED Talk that I often refer to clients, because I think it shifts us. And I've had clients, I say, before you go into that interview, watch this video. And my clients will come back and say, totally shifted how I felt inside and then how I projected in the interview.
I think it became popularized by Grey's Anatomy. So I think some people in a workshop I did last week were like, oh yeah, I saw that on Grey's Anatomy. The clarification I would make is that you don't do the pose when you're in the meeting. You do the pose before the meeting,
yes.
Maybe in the ladies' room or the men's room for 90 seconds, and then you go into the meeting. So
thank you for that clarification. Yes, my clients usually do it in the bathroom before going in. Again, that was when we actually had in-person interviews. I have not had a client for 4 years who I think has had, it's rare that people are in person these days, even though I'm starting to see, I know Shannon has been on site recently, starting to get more traction in terms of those on-site leadership retreats and connection opportunities. I want to just get a definition real quickly when we're talking leadership presence. And I know there's been kind of back and forth on, do we want to call it executive presence? And, what does that image, in our mind, are we trying to be somebody else? And I'd love to get your definition of leadership presence and how that dovetails into maintaining your own authenticity.
So I did use the phrase executive presence for a program that I designed, and I did a train the trainer and facilitated it in 5 countries. And the same confusion around the definition, even though we joked about executive presence, it still people got confused. Like, do I have to be an executive? Am I presenting to executives? Am I giving a present to an executive? So I do like to use leadership presence because I think that it gets confused. I also think that sometimes people use it as code, and I always like to dig down into what do you actually mean by that. When I am defining it generally, I talk about how it's the ability to influence other people and the ability to own a room, to manage yourself, and to convey your ideas powerfully. So there are 1,000 definitions of it. I think that it definitely pertains to virtual or in person. So going back to our comment about power poses, you can definitely do a power pose before a virtual session too. And I think it translates as well.
Yeah.
As far as the authenticity question, I think one of the reasons I've become interested in this question recently is that I've gotten some pushback where people are like, but I'm X number of years old and I am who I am, and I don't want you to try to change me. And they seem to be worried about being told that they should be someone else. And this is where, when you're coaching someone and the leader says they need to have more executive presence, I want to know, what do they mean by that? Is it that they want a woman to be more like a man? Is it that they want them to speak slower or louder or lean in more or talk more in a meeting? Like, it can mean a whole host of things, and we could, go and define those. As far as authenticity goes, I always try to push back on that, because people are like, well, I am who I am. Like, really? Now, are you have a lot of roles you play in life, right? For me, I am a mother, I am a daughter, I am a sister, I am, a colleague, I'm a dog owner, I am, a friend, and I'm a different version of Shannon in each of those situations. So I wouldn't be the mother in a meeting with a CEO that I'm coaching. I wouldn't go, oh, your child looks so cute today, right? That's a different performance. And we instinctively know that it's a different performance, but for some reason we get fixed on this idea of like identity when we're adjusting it all the time. So I always like to think about it as we're coaches. We want people to be the best version of themselves in these different situations. The problem is that as kids, we believe kids can grow and learn and develop, but as adults, we're sort of like, well, you're this, you're a doctor, you're a lawyer, you're, as if you can't change. But we know from adult development that you can change and develop. And I came across this theory from Lev Vygotsky, who's a Russian philosopher. And he called it the zone of proximal development, which is basically there's who you are and there's who you are not yet, who you're becoming. And, with a kid, we go, oh, she said, Baba, bottle. See, she's brilliant. She's saying bottle, right? We're completing the sentence. We're endowing her with that ability. But with adults, we don't do that as much. But I think coaches do. Coaches see where you can grow. Yeah. And so in that zone of proximal development, there's who you're growing into as a leader. And there was a psychologist named Alfred Adler who said, sometimes my clients will say, I need to be more empathetic, or I need to be, have more confidence. And he would say, why don't you act as if you're confident 3 times a day and see what happens? And they would act as if they were confident. And then suddenly they would perceive themselves as more confident, because we observe ourselves just like we observe other people. We make assessments. And then we say, oh, look, I'm confident. So I think that acting really translates to this, because you act into that future self that you want to be in acting as if you are empathetic 3 times a day.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's why I say, you're not fixed. You're not just this person who's set in stone. When I go to the gym, I want to be more healthy, so I lift weights, which is uncomfortable and awkward. I would rather be at home eating Ben & Jerry's and binge watching Netflix. But I am doing something that is difficult to become, to act as if I am sporty and healthy and fit.
Yeah. No, I love that. And you're right. I think as coaches, and that's why we have the title of our podcast is What's Possible. We do see what's possible in the individual, and that's what we're helping them achieve. So now my question is, you have a leader who says, I get it. You know what? I totally get what you're saying, Shannon, and I want to practice these things. I'm going to act as if I'm going to do power poses. I'm going to embrace all of this. Awesome. We don't have control over the person on the other side of the desk, in the Zoom, in the room with us, whatever it is, those people who we're showing up for. How do we change perspective when really all we have is control of ourselves? How do you help clients kind of get others to see them as this new person?
That's a great question. I think that one way is to enlist them in helping you. And we know from the research on resilience that asking for help is a resilience strategy. And also, it makes other people happier to help you. So I think if it's someone that you feel comfortable saying, hey, there's this thing I'm working on, and I'd love for you to, let me know. I'm trying to get my voice in the room in the first 5 minutes, which is one of the things research shows that if you get your voice in the room in the first few minutes of a meeting, you're more likely to speak later.
Oh, wow.
So I often tell women this who need to assert themselves a little bit more. So let's say you tell your colleague, okay, I'm trying to get my voice in the room. Let me know how that goes. So then they're looking for it, and then they see it. They're more likely to see it. So I think that's one of a few ways that you can enroll them in your change and in your development.
Yeah, I really love that. And I think it also helps you, get sponsors and mentors as you kind of spread it with, if you do have a sponsor or you have a mentor, to spread it with them so that they can start to identify it and also probably talk about it. So if I'm, say, your sponsor and now I'm in a meeting, I could also, and you're not there, I could say to somebody, gosh, I've been in a few meetings with Shannon recently, and she's showing up totally differently. She's really been sharing her thoughts and what's on her mind and has some really great new direction or strategic plan or what have you. I can start talking about you even behind closed doors because I know that this is something you're working on and I'm seeing it happening. And it's a way that we can start to support one another in becoming that person who they want to be.
And I think it's two things. One is it's a baby step, right? Just asking for looking for this in a meeting can then snowball to having even more support. And the second thing is usually in a coaching engagement, we have them meet with three of us. We meet with the manager at the beginning and the end and say, this is what the client wants to work on. We're going to check in with you at the end to see how it went. So they know they're sort of on the hook for coming back, and it becomes something in their, the back of their mind that they need to be looking for because they have a meeting coming up about it. So
exactly. It's embedded in all of our executive coaching sessions. And the other place that it's embedded is in the 360 that we do, the Shift Positive 360. When we're working with our most senior leaders, this is a 360 that is transparent. So we're having one-to-one interviews with everybody in your orbit, basically. Anybody who is a stakeholder who we're working on to ideally have them be allies. And in that process, we are asking them, how might you support this person? And we can also have that conversation in those sessions. So there's so many different ways to help support you in changing that perspective.
That's right. That's why I love the Shift Positive 360. I've seen such amazing results with clients because suddenly, instead of it being adversarial, it's, we're all on the same boat. All boats rise. So you're part of the solution, and it assumes they're part of the solution. So then they have to think of something to contribute, and usually that's not a problem. So that's why I love it.
I love your example that you gave of the one woman who you had met in that setting and kind of her transformation. Do you have any other stories that might help people see how this might look in action, how you've coached someone through gaining greater leadership presence, kind of the beginning, the before and after shots of somebody?
Sure. Yeah, I'll tell you one about an internal, sort of inside out, and one on the outside in. So on an inside out story, I was coaching this woman who came in and she was like, well, my boss hates me. I was like, oh, interesting. How do you know that? She's like, well, this and this and this, and I didn't get asked to do this. And, she had all the list of reasons. And so I did something with her, which from cognitive behavioral therapy, Drs. Beck and Ellis, the ABCDE. And we went through, what is an activating event? What happened? Just the facts. What are your thoughts? What are your beliefs, your ticker tape thoughts? What's the result? What are you feeling? What's the emotion? And she reiterated, put her thoughts in B. And then we went to how do you dispute those? If you had to give evidence for when your boss is really supportive or your boss does like you. And I didn't see her. We weren't doing video, but there was this pause and this sort of like intake. And she went, oh, she actually does come to me when she needs expert advice on this topic. And there was a long silence. And then she said, I guess there are moments when she has supported me. Maybe I'm looking at this the wrong way. And it was a great, really exciting moment of someone's confirmation bias being shattered in that moment, because she realized that her lens was only looking for the things that went wrong. And as a result, she didn't have a good relationship and probably wasn't showing up as a great leader or collaborator with her boss. And suddenly that shifted her thinking. So sometimes I like to use that as the inside out, whether it's, how are you thinking about this presentation? I think the biggest myth about people who used to be professional actors is that we never get nervous. The truth is that we do. We just have a lot of strategies to manage it. So when I had a big appreciative inquiry summit and I was, a big client, and I realized I was like, I'm nervous. What am I thinking? I'm thinking, I hope I don't mess it up. And I was like, oh, Shannon, you know better than that. So I was like, all right, let me think of something outlandish and would make my mother blush with pride, or overweening pride. And I thought, what if this is the most amazing workshop I've ever done? And it made me laugh. First of all, it's like the positive emotion undoes the negative emotion, the Barbara Fredrickson research. So first of all, it sort of undid the negative emotion because it was so out there. And then I was like, oh, wait, what would it look like? And then suddenly my mind started to go with what it could look like. And it went very well. So those are two things, although I didn't mean to use myself as the second example.
I love that. No, I love that. And what I like about that, Shannon, is everything Shannon's saying, as you can tell, grounded in research. And that's one of the things with all of our coaches. We come from a positive psychology background, which is the science of well-being. So it's not just Shannon thinking, oh, this might be a fun idea. I'm going to test it out on you. But there's a lot of research that really backs what Shannon's talking about up. If what Shannon's talking about resonates with you and you're thinking, I could use something that would help me shift some of my beliefs, because we have a natural inclination to go towards something. And it is our path of least resistance is to think, they don't like us, or, oh, I'm not good enough, or, oh, I'm probably going to mess this up, or I got this promotion, I'm not deserving of it. All of those things, it's mind chatter. It's negative thoughts that are just, as Shannon called it, a ticker tape. And it just keeps running through our mind. Some of them might be accurate. I don't want to say they're not accurate all the time, but I'd say with my clients, they're almost 99.9% not accurate, but our brain is not always working in our best interest. So if you find you may be one of these people, which means that you're incredibly, incredibly normal and typical, because that is part of the human journey, you might want to look into Beck and Ellis's work, which is cognitive behavioral therapy. And then what positive psychology has done is kind of added on to that work. And a great book to look into is Learned Optimism by Martin Seligman. It's not a new book, but he talks about explanatory style and how we explain and internalize external events. That book can really help you. In addition to Learned Optimism, you might want to look at Flourish, which is by Marty Seligman as well. And then one other one is Chatter by Ethan Kross. And that talks a lot about these thoughts that are not necessarily accurate. So that might help you if you need to perhaps undo some patterns that have built up over time. Shannon, do you have some other ones to recommend?
Well, I wanted to recommend Tara Brach's book. She is a meditation teacher in the DC area, and her book, Radical Acceptance, is coming up on its 20th anniversary and has a new edition. But one of her favorite quotes that I think fits this conversation is that your thoughts are real, but not true. They're real, but not true. They feel very real. So whenever I'm thinking, oh no, this is terrible, I haven't had enough time to repair, it's going to go badly, right? That negativity bias, but it doesn't mean our thoughts are true.
Yeah.
And so I think having that separation, that distance from our thoughts can be incredibly helpful when we're thinking about presence, which is a stressful situation for most people. I mean, the joke in people who teach presence is that people are more afraid of giving a speech than of death. They would rather be in the casket than giving the eulogy. So that's why I really like to talk about different strategies for how to manage that. And CBT and explanatory style and some of the things you've mentioned are a few of those ways.
Yeah. And one other thing you might want to consider is working with a coach, working with a therapist, somebody external who you can get some of these thoughts out of your head too, because I think the more we keep them trapped in our head, they can grow. And when you get them out, or even talking to a friend about it, as you're going to give a presentation and say, you know, I'm feeling super anxious and I'm so worried I'm going to bomb, they might be that outside voice that can say, well, when was your last presentation? How'd you do on that? What have you done to prepare or whatever? So that having an external voice outside of your own realm might be helpful as well.
I think that's a great point. And it's a great inside out strategy. As far as managing stress or nerves from an outside in strategy, the somatic strategy, there is as much adrenaline running through an actor's body on opening night as someone who's been in a car accident.
Oh, wow.
So I liken that similarly to someone who's, presenting before the board of directors. So there's just a lot of physically happening in your body. And there are physical things you have to do to try to manage that stress, whether it's exercising in the morning or taking a hot bath or stretching your lower back on the floor with a book under your head so that you can release your pelvis. There are lots of different ways, but there are some physical things you need to do to try to release that energy. And I think of it as energy. That's the difference. Is I don't think, oh no, I'm nervous. I think, oh good, I got my energy. I'm ready to go. Because if I don't have any of that, I'm like, uh-oh. I'm going to have to manufacture it from somewhere. So I think that's the difference, is the perception of, is this a bad thing or is it a good thing?
Well, and as I said, I was helping my daughter prep for an interview. And I said, when you feel nervous, that often tells you this is something important to me. When you feel that running through your body, it's like, oh, good, this is important to me. And then we did my favorite thing. And I'm like, okay, dance party. Let's shake it off and have a quick dance party and get this energy out. And so I typically will do my own little dance party by myself or go for a walk. Like I can feel the energy, congregating within my body. And I'm like, I need to get this kind of the frenetic energy out and then tap the healthy energy to move me forward. And I'm curious, what's your go-to?
It is so simple to be overlooked, but it's really, there's breathing and music. So I think music is so great because it depends. I think great for celebration and great for just shifting your mood immediately. So I definitely use music. I use breathing, which I know you've talked about on the show. The other thing I do is I pet my dog because it increases oxytocin. It lowers my heart rate. I can be present with the dog. And I know that also builds my relationship with my dog. It's very tactile. So that's usually my go-to. If it's a virtual session, I obviously can't bring my dog to in-person sessions, although I wish I could.
True. Before I ask our key questions that I always like to ask our guests, I just want to highlight this really amazing program that you've put together, the Speakers Studio. Can you tell our listeners a little bit about what you are offering?
Thank you so much. I'm really excited to get to collaborate with another MAP colleague, Jordana Cole, and we have created a cornerstone course with different levels. You can go at your own pace, or you can do it with a live cohort. It's 6 weeks. We're doing our next session starting in September. And the content is really both about how you structure a presentation or a talk or a workshop, a ton of worksheets, supportive worksheets, and then the how, sort of the physical aspects, some of the things we've been talking about today, but going a little deeper. And it's really great to get feedback from other colleagues and see what other people are doing. So we're really excited to get to launch our next cohort, and it's at speakers.studio. So we would love to see you there.
So for those of you listeners interested in really bumping up your ability in the speaking space and this leadership presence, you may want to go to speakers.studio to learn more about Shannon and Jordana's program. And if you're interested in bringing in Shannon to work with yourself or one of your leaders in your organization one-to-one, or in a group situation, a team offsite, do visit us at svchange.com. And you can learn more about Shannon on our website at svchange.com/Shannon. All right. So wrapping up, what would you say you hope is one big takeaway that our listeners leave with?
I really hope that if you can grab onto another acronym, I hope you remember the ZPD, or the zone of proximal development, that you are both who you are and who you're not yet at the same time. And that there's it's like a trail of who you're going to become. That's part of who you are today.
I had already written that down. I love that zone of proximal development. Can you remind us who that researcher is on that?
It's Lev Vygotsky, who is a Russian philosopher.
A philosopher. Excellent.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. And what is a mindset shift that you hope they will take away?
I hope that people will try the acting as if. I love that it's been studied in different realms in both acting and social psychology. Daryl Bem was the social psychologist that said, we observe ourselves. And so when we observe ourselves acting in a certain way, then we see, oh, I am that. Oh, I am kind. I am empathetic. So I hope that you'll try the acting as if. Sometimes it lowers the bar so we don't feel like all this pressure. It's just an experiment. And one of our colleagues, Catherine Britton, has written a great article called Think of It as an Experiment, which I often use with my coaching clients.
Excellent. So act as if. So when you're in that space that you feel like, oh, this isn't me, act as if. I also, on that note, Shannon, will think of someone who I admire who does it really well. And I'll think, what would they do in that space? So,
yeah, a paragon of the strength or of the thing you're looking for. Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And lastly, what is one plug and play action, the easiest thing someone can do that will have the biggest impact?
Ooh, that's a variation on David Coopereder's, the smallest thing will have the biggest impact. I think the smallest thing that would have the biggest impact is probably putting your feet on the floor, your lower back against the chair, and breathing out twice as long as you breathe in. Because that exhale kicks in the parasympathetic nervous system. And there's one singing teacher I have that shows if you just breathe out for as long as you can and you let all the air exit your body and then just let the air come in, that lowers your heart rate.
Wow. And that's something you could do in seconds.
Yeah, it's in 30 seconds or less.
And what's possible when we embrace our own unique leadership presence?
I think what's possible is that we can take up more space. We can actually take up more space, not for the purpose of just us being bigger, but for us inspiring other people, for us influencing other people to get our message across. And that's what I think principally is what's possible.
Shannon, I am going to ask you two bonus questions.
Bonus questions.
Yes. So we've done all the key topics, and I think what you have provided our listeners is invaluable. So many practical, actionable steps. So thank you for that. And now, if we can bend your ear or bend your mind for two more things, what is the favorite book that you have read in the last couple months, so very recently?
Well, one that I have read is by a very good friend of mine who's an amazing writer, Emily Rabideau, and it's called Lessons for Survival: Mothering Against the Apocalypse. And it's a series of essays. She takes a view through New York City, and they're essays about being a person of color, about the environment. And she just has such a unique way of seeing things that I think most people like breeze by and don't see, that it really started to make me look at the world differently. I started to see birds, and I started to notice things that I hadn't noticed before, and to have more empathy for the environment and topics that I know that I should be focusing on, but I in our busy lives, I'm like, right, well, I recycle, and her writing is just so beautiful. It's very, very inspiring to read.
Oh, good. I'm going to have to pick that one up. Lessons for Survival. And what was the subtitle?
Mothering Against the Apocalypse.
Mothering Against the Apocalypse. It seems quite timely. I will definitely put that on the top of my list. And lastly, as somebody who has a very full life, you have two daughters, actively mothering, you are running a coaching business, and then also you have just launched a really cool speakers series, which actually I would love you to tell the listeners how to find out about that for people who do want to expand their speaking capability. How do you start your day so that you can manage everything in life?
I'll tell you how to start. I start my day, and then I'll tell you about the speaker studio, if that's okay. So how I start my day is a little bit of a cheat on the meditation. When I was in MAP and I didn't have children, I meditated for like 45 minutes every morning, and now reality has sunk in. So what I do is I turn on Tara Brach, who is my favorite meditation teacher, along with Corey Mascara. I turn on her podcasts to center me and ground me, because her voice centers me, and the Dharma talks remind me about what's important. So when I'm like, we're late for school, it makes me center and be like, okay, fine. The hilarious thing is now my children make fun of me for listening to Tara Brach because her voice is very meditation teacher-like. And so my daughter has a stand-up routine. She's like, I'm Tara Brach. I think I'm better than you. And I'm like, Harper, she's really good. She's a practicing Buddhist. Anyway, it's led to some good discussions about Buddhism. But I do find that even if I can't get to the cushion in the morning, at least I can center while I'm making breakfast and listen to those talks.
I love that meditation hack. And and now, can you tell our listeners about this exciting announcement that you have?
Yeah, I'm really excited to get to collaborate with my colleague Jordana Cole on the Speakers Studio, and we nabbed the website speakers.studio. And it's a 6-week course that we're doing live virtual online with a cohort with an asynchronous learning portion. So it's sort of reverse learning where we're doing videos about the content. And then when you come in person, you get to workshop your talk or presentation or workshop, whatever you're doing. We also have, you can just do the online portion without the group if you don't want to do, with other people. But I think it's really a big benefit to get to see what other people are doing, to learn from them, to get feedback. And we've had our first cohort. We finished that, and we're doing our second cohort starting in September. So we're really excited to help people with all these tools that, we can tailor to them.
Congratulations. I know several people who were in your pilot group, and they speak so highly of the program. So head on over to Shannon if you would like to get more information on that speaker training. And then if you would like to work with Shannon one-to-one or bring her into your organization, visit svchange.com. And you can also find her on our website at svchange.com/Shannon. Thank you again for your time, your wisdom, and your friendship. I greatly appreciate you.
Thanks for having me, Eileen. It was a delight.
This podcast is a catalyst for your leadership and well-being journey. To step deeper into exceptional leadership, visit svchange.com for personalized support that will take you to the next level. If you find this show meaningful, please hit that follow or subscribe button. It helps more people find what's possible organically. If you have questions about anything we've talked about, please drop me a line at podcast@svchange.com. I read every email I get, whether that's an episode idea, a guest recommendation, or just a simple note about how the show has impacted you. I'd love to hear from you. I'm Eileen Schaefer. Thanks for listening. What's Possible is produced by the team at Palm Tree Pod Co. The executive producer is Anthony Palmer. Thanks to Emily Miles and Caitlin Krings for video and digital support. The content for this podcast is created by Eileen Schaefer and the team at Silicon Valley Change.